Martin Campbell is a media commentator and former chief advisor to the broadcasting regulator Ofcom. Martin, thank you for your time this morning. What do you make of where the BBC finds itself this morning?
Absolutely staggering. I mean, as a journalist, it is so sad. But as it starts to sink in as to just how devastating this is, it's the sort of behaviour you'd expect from a tin pot for here today, gone tomorrow news website. And if it had been that, people would be talking about criminal proceedings. And I'm sure somebody somewhere is, and I think it's that serious.
It is an interview from 26 years ago, though.
Yeah, of course, and that's what makes it worse, because there has clearly been a cover-up for over 2 decades. I mean, it's a phenomenal finding that Dyson's actually produced.
Has he found, do you think, evidence of a wider problem within the BBC, or is this really about one rogue reporter who used these methods to secure this interview?
Well, it's an interesting point. I've long been critical of the BBC and the way that it has effectively regulated itself in the past. Interestingly, Lord Grey's been talking about, it's time for the BBC to understand that, it is not always right. And there was clearly a sort of smear campaign that Dyson has highlighted as well through the BBC. So you've also got a senior management that hasn't been named, but somewhere someone authorised all this to happen. And that's the big problem. So yeah, it goes much further than one rogue reporter. And the other thing, of course, that goes further than one rogue reporter is that a lot of people made a lot out of this. I mean, Bashir made a lucrative career for himself out of this. The BBC enhanced its position, undoubtedly made a great deal of money on the back of the actual interview, but also the knock-on effect of the influence that it's shown, because it's the BBC, so a lot of people have made a lot out of this. But as the Prince William's statement last night said, this led to a chain of events that raised the level of problems for royalty, raised the levels of problems for the relationship, and he makes the direct link to the death of his mother, and I think a lot of people will.
But we look at where the BBC is now in 2021, and often to me it seems regrettably entirely scared of its own shadow. I just think back a few years ago off the top of my head to an example of the mea culpa that it offered when viewers apparently had named the Blue Peter cat with one name and the BBC decided to go with a different name, and yes, they considered that to be the greatest scandal in the world. It's difficult to imagine, unless I'm being hugely naive, that this could conceivably happen now in 2021?
Well, I'm not so sure. I wouldn't accuse you of being naive, Darren, but I think it could happen. I mean, for a start, if you look at the criteria that Ofcom have to sift through to see if they are going to do anything about the BBC, and they could find them an awful lot of money here. They look at the seriousness of what's happened, and the seriousness of this is through the roof. They look at the degree of harm that could be done, and that's probably incalculable. They look at the steps taken to prevent the breach. Well, they've covered it up for 25 years. And they also look, and this is my point here, at the history of broadcast rule contravention, which you raise. Yeah, it's not that long ago that they were fined £400,000 for faking competition winners and listener deception. It's not just the Blue Peter cat. So there is form there. The BBC does have form.
It also has form, though, of apologising profusely and saying we shall never do this again. And I just wonder whether maybe the climate has changed in a way that would make this culturally at least a lot more difficult to happen again at the BBC.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I must admit, Tim Davie has done a reasonable job with the apology, although there's part of me that thinks it looks a little bit more like an apology for being found out. But it just shows, for years, the critics of the BBC are told, oh, get on, it's a lovely organisation. I mean, Lord Hall clearly was there when things were being covered up. I mean, he was going to go down in history anyway as having been as much use to the BBC as a chocolate fireguard. But I mean, this puts things in a whole new league for him. I mean, this is a cover-up over years and years and years. A cover-up culture is what Dyson talked about.
It's worth remembering, though, two things. Firstly, Martin Bashir contends that these fake bank statements, which he apologises for and regrets, and are obviously indefensible, he says, though, they had no bearing on the decision of Diana to grant him that interview. And also in the statement from William in the last couple of hours, he says the interview was a major contribution to making my parents' relationship worse. But none of that means that what was said in the interview was untrue.
But the interview itself is entirely discredited because the Dyson report says that not only was she coerced into this by being shown bank statements, or Earl Spencer rather, being shown bank statements, but the whole point of the bank statements backed up a whole other tissue of lies about whether staff were briefing against her, and so the whole premise of the interview, the answer with that in the background, and so the interview is discredited. I don't think it is it entirely,
because I think what sticks out in a lot of people's minds from that interview is there were three of us in this marriage, and I can't see anything that suggests that Diana was compelled or persuaded or induced A, to say that, or B, that it wasn't true.
Oh, I think you're undoubtedly right there, Darren, but it's irrelevant as to whether she gave the interview Bashir or somebody else because she wanted to say that line. Clearly, that was a line that she was going to say, come what may. But the fact of the matter is, and this is what Prince William's statement goes to, is that all the feeding that went on of her paranoia in order to get her to agree to do the interview with Bashir made the whole situation a lot worse. So it has to be seen through that prism.
I mean, this is a great imponderable, but do you think anyway she remained for her, as we now know? Might she have sought another outlet for these comments?
Oh, yes. Yeah, undoubtedly. But it wouldn't have been based on a platform of paranoia that had been fed by false allegations and false rumours and lies, as Dyson has said. I mean, he hasn't minced his words, and I'm glad of that. It gives you some faith in inquiries.
And just another word on what William has said in this statement. It's my firm view that this Panorama programme holds no legitimacy and should never be aired again. I think it would be, to go back to that sort of yes minister terminology, a brave decision in any event now for the BBC to seek to broadcast it again. But do you think that ought to be specifically banned?
I don't think there's a need for ban. I hate the way that bans are pushed around. You're absolutely right. It's as much chance of being replayed on mainstream television as Love Thy Neighbour is going to be repeated. It's just not going to happen.
Martin, thank you very much. That's Martin Campbell, media commentator, former chief advisor to the broadcast regulator Ofcom. 0345 6060 973. What do you make of where the BBC finds itself this morning?